There's a moment right before you respond where everything is decided. Not when you speak, not when you act, but in that tiny, almost invisible space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond to it. Most people never notice that moment. They skip right past it. Something happens, someone says something, life throws pressure, criticism, disrespect, uncertainty, and instantly they react instantly. No pause, no awareness, just emotion taking control. And here's the truth we don't like to admit. Most reactions are not strength, they are habit. They are conditioning, they are the echo of past wounds, insecurities, fears, and the desperate need to protect an identity we feel is under attack. But what if your power wasn't in reacting? What if your real power was in not reacting? Because not reacting is not weakness. It is not silence out of fear. It is not avoidance. It is control. It is awareness. It is choosing who you want to be in a moment when it's easier to be someone else. Think about it. Anyone can react. It doesn't take strength to snap back when someone insults you. It doesn't take discipline to get angry when something doesn't go your way. It doesn't take awareness to interrupt, to argue, to defend, to prove. That's easy. What's hard is staying grounded when everything inside you wants to explode. What's hard is holding your composure when you're misunderstood. What's hard is choosing silence when your ego is screaming to be heard. That's where power lies. Because the person who reacts is controlled by the outside world. The person who doesn't react is controlled from within. And there's a massive difference between those two lives. One life is driven by circumstances. The other is driven by intention. One life is unpredictable, emotional, exhausting. The other is steady, focused, and deeply effective. When you react to everything, you give your power away, piece by piece, moment by moment. You allow other people's words, opinions, and actions to dictate your internal state. But when you choose not to react, something incredible happens. You create space. Space to think, space to understand, space to choose. And in that space, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because now, you're not operating from emotion. You're operating from clarity. Let me give you something to think about. Have you ever said something in anger that you later regretted? Of course you have. We all have. In that moment, it felt justified. It felt right. It felt necessary. But later, when the emotion faded, you saw it clearly. You saw that it wasn't strength, it was impulse. Now imagine if, in that moment, you had paused, just for a few seconds, just long enough to observe what you were feeling instead of becoming it. That one pause could have changed everything. This is the power of not reacting. It gives you access to your best self, especially when it matters most, because your best self is not loud, it's not defensive, it's not reactive. Your best self is calm, focused, intentional. Your best self doesn't need to win every argument, prove every point, or respond to every comment. Your best self understands something most people don't. Not everything deserves your energy. And that's where people get it wrong. They think they have to respond to everything, every opinion, every message, every piece of criticism, every moment of disrespect. But the truth is, the more you respond to everything, the less powerful your response becomes. Because now your energy is scattered. But when you become selective, when you choose what deserves your attention and what doesn't, you begin to operate differently. You begin to lead yourself. And leadership starts here. It doesn't start with leading others. It doesn't start with influence or authority or recognition. It starts with leading your own emotions. Because if you can't control how you react, you can't control where your life goes. And here's something even deeper. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't feel. You feel everything. The difference is you don't let those feelings control your behavior. You acknowledge them. You observe them. But you don't surrender to them. There's a level of maturity that comes with this. Because when you stop reacting, you start understanding. You start asking better questions. Why did that bother me? Why did that trigger me? What is it inside me that feels threatened right now? And those questions lead to growth. Because now, instead of pointing fingers outward, you start looking inward. And that's where real change happens. Most people spend their lives trying to control others. What they say, how they act, how they treat them. But the people who truly transform their lives focus on one thing controlling themselves. Their thoughts, their emotions, their reactions. Because that's the only thing they actually have control over. And when you master that, you don't just change your behavior, you change your entire presence. People feel it. They notice it. They don't always know what it is, but they sense it. There's a calmness about you, a confidence, a quiet strength, because you're not easily shaken. You're not easily triggered. You're not easily pulled into chaos. And in a world where everyone is reacting, that kind of presence stands out. It commands respect without demanding it. It influences without forcing it. It leads without speaking too much. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Because everything around you is designed to make you react. Social media is built on reaction. News is built on reaction. Conversations are often driven by reaction. Everything is fast, instant, emotional. And if you're not careful, you get pulled into that rhythm. You start living in reaction mode. Always responding, always defending, always engaging, and slowly, without realizing it, you lose control. So stepping back, choosing not to react feels uncomfortable at first. It feels unnatural. It feels like you're holding something back. But what you're actually doing is taking something back. Your power, your control, your identity. Because when you stop reacting, you start deciding. And decisions create direction. Reactions create chaos. So the next time something happens and it will pause, don't rush to respond. Don't rush to prove. Don't rush to defend. Just observe. Feel what you're feeling, but don't become it. Give yourself that space. Because in that space, you have a choice. You can react like you always have. Or you can respond like the person you're becoming. And those two paths lead to very different lives. One keeps you stuck in patterns. The other moves you forward with purpose. This is not about being passive. This is not about letting people walk over you. This is about choosing your moments. Because when you don't react to everything, when you don't give your energy to every situation, when you finally do respond, it carries weight. It carries intention. It carries impact. Because it's not driven by emotion. It's driven by clarity. And clarity is powerful. Clarity cuts through noise. Clarity builds trust. Clarity creates influence. So if you want to change your life, don't start by trying to control everything around you. Start here. Start with that small, almost invisible moment between stimulus and response. Train yourself to notice it. Expand it. Live in it, because that's where your power is. Not in what happens to you, but in how you choose to respond. And sometimes the strongest response is no reaction at all. True control is choosing timing, not just controlling behavior. Because most people think control means holding yourself back. They think it means biting your tongue, suppressing your emotions, forcing yourself to stay calm while everything inside you is burning. But that's not control. That's pressure building beneath the surface, waiting for the right or wrong moment to explode. Real control is different. Real control is not just about what you do. It's about when you do it. And that changes everything. Because timing is what gives meaning to behavior. The same words said at the wrong time can destroy trust. The same words said at the right time can build it. The same action taken too early can look like impulsiveness. Taken too late, it looks like hesitation. But taken at the right moment, it becomes precision. That's where mastery lies, not in the action itself, but in the awareness of when that action matters most. Think about how many times you've reacted instantly, said something immediately, responded without thinking, jumped into a situation because you felt you had to. In that moment, it felt like control. It felt like you were taking charge. But in reality, you were being pulled by urgency, not guided by intention. And urgency is not the same as importance. Urgency screams. Importance whispers. Urgency demands that you act now. Importance asks you to wait, to observe, to understand. Most people live in urgency. They answer immediately. They respond emotionally. They speak quickly. They decide fast. And sometimes that works. But often it costs them clarity because they never give themselves the space to see the full picture. Timing requires patience. And patience is uncomfortable because when something happens, especially something emotional, your instinct is to move, to fix, to respond, to regain control as quickly as possible. But what if the fastest move is not the strongest one? What if the strongest move is waiting? Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. Waiting is active. It's awareness in motion. It's watching, listening, processing. It's allowing the situation to reveal itself instead of forcing a response before you understand it. When you choose timing, you stop reacting to the surface and start responding to the truth beneath it. And that's a different level of awareness. Because now you're not just managing your behavior. You're managing your presence. You're not just controlling what you say. You're controlling when your voice enters the room. And that matters more than people realize. Because when you speak too soon, your words compete with noise. When you act too early, your actions lack context. But when you choose your moment, when you step in at the right time, everything aligns. People are ready to listen. The situation is clear. Your intention is sharp. That's influence. And influence is not about volume. It's about timing. You've seen people who talk a lot, who react to everything, who jump into every conversation. And over time, their words lose weight. Not because they're wrong, but because they're constant. Now compare that to someone who speaks less, who observes more, who chooses their moments carefully. When they finally say something, it lands, it matters. It shifts the room. That's not an accident. That's control. Because they understand that power is not in constant expression. It's in intentional expression. And intention requires timing. But here's where it gets even more important. Choosing timing is not just about external situations. It's about internal discipline. Because sometimes the hardest thing is not holding back from others. It's holding back from yourself. Holding back from the urge to prove something. Holding back from the need to be right. Holding back from the desire to win. Because those urges don't wait. They push. They demand. They convince you that now is the moment, even when it's not. And if you're not aware, you follow them. You react too soon. You speak too quickly. You act without clarity. and then you deal with the consequences later. But when you develop timing, something shifts. You start to question your impulses. You start to pause before you act. You start to ask yourself, is this the right moment? And that question alone changes your behavior. Because now you're not just acting, you're choosing. And choice creates power. Let's take a simple example. Someone disrespects you. In that moment, everything inside you wants to respond immediately, to defend yourself, to correct them, to assert your position. And sometimes that's necessary, but not always. Because reacting in that moment might escalate the situation. It might turn a small moment into a bigger conflict. It might give more attention to something that doesn't deserve it. But if you choose timing, if you pause, observe, and respond later when emotions have settled, you gain control over the outcome. Now, your response is not emotional, it's intentional. Now, your words are not defensive, they're clear. Now, your presence is not reactive, it's grounded. And that changes how people receive you. Because people don't just respond to what you say. They respond to when and how you say it. Timing shapes perception. It shapes trust. It shapes influence. And once you understand that, you stop chasing immediate reactions. You start building deliberate responses. But this requires something deeper. It requires confidence. Because choosing timing often means doing nothing in the moment. And doing nothing can feel like losing. It can feel like weakness. It can feel like you're giving up control. But the opposite is true. You're not losing control. You're redefining it. Because control is not about immediate action. It's about effective action. And effective action is always connected to timing. Think about leaders. The ones who truly stand out are not the ones who react to every situation instantly. They're the ones who observe, who gather information, who understand the dynamics before they move. They don't rush decisions just to appear decisive. They take their time so that when they decide it's right. And that's what makes their actions powerful, not speed, not volume. Timing. And this applies to every area of your life, in conversations, in relationships, in opportunities, in conflict, knowing when to speak, knowing when to stay silent, knowing when to act, knowing when to wait. These are not random choices. They are skills. Skills that can be developed. But only if you're willing to slow down. Only if you're willing to resist the pressure of immediacy. Because the world will always push you to react faster, faster decisions, faster opinions. But faster is not always better. Sometimes faster is careless. Sometimes faster is emotional. Sometimes faster is wrong. And the people who understand timing, they don't compete in speed, they compete in precision. They don't try to be first. They try to be right. And being right requires patience. It requires awareness. It requires trust in yourself. Trust that you don't need to respond immediately to maintain your value. Trust that your silence is not weakness. Trust that waiting does not mean losing. Because when you trust that, you start to operate differently. You stop chasing moments. You start creating them. You start recognizing when something is worth your energy and when it's not. You start understanding that not every situation deserves your immediate attention. And that frees you. It frees you from unnecessary conflict. It frees you from emotional exhaustion. It frees you from constantly being pulled in different directions. Because now you are choosing where your energy goes. And energy, when directed with timing, becomes impact. Because here's the truth. You can say the right thing at the wrong time and it will be ignored. You can take the right action at the wrong time and it will fail. But when your timing is right, even simple actions become powerful. Even small words carry weight. Even quiet moments create change. And that's what makes timing so valuable. It amplifies everything. It turns control into influence. It turns awareness into action. It turns intention into results. But you have to practice it. You have to train yourself to pause, to observe, to wait, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when everything inside you is telling you to act now. Because that's the test. The test is not whether you can control your behavior when it's easy. The test is whether you can control your timing when it's hard. When emotions are high, when pressure is intense, when the moment feels urgent, that's when timing matters most. And that's when most people fail. Because they confuse movement with progress. They think doing something is always better than doing nothing. But sometimes doing nothing in the moment is what allows you to do the right thing later. And that's control. That's discipline. That's power. Because now you're not reacting to life. You're engaging with it on your terms. You're choosing when to step in. You're choosing when to step back. You're choosing when to speak. You're choosing when to stay silent. And those choices shape your life more than any reaction ever could, because reactions are temporary. But timing creates lasting impact. It defines how people see you. It defines how situations unfold. It defines the kind of presence you bring into the world. And once you master that, you realize something important. You don't need to control everything. You don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to act on every impulse. You just need to choose your moments. Because the right moment, chosen with clarity, will always be stronger than 1,000 reactions driven by emotion,